The night I heard my neighbor crying through the thin wall between our apartments, it sounded like something breaking that could never be put back together. It was not loud or dramatic, just a quiet, exhausted sound, the kind that comes from someone who has run out of strength to pretend they are fine. Earlier that evening, she had stood in the hallway under the flickering light, her eyes red, her shoulders slumped, and she had asked me a question that carried years of pain inside it. Her husband had left her for a younger woman, and she wondered if she was still pretty. That question followed me into the darkness, heavy and unsettling, because it was not really about beauty at all. It was about worth, about being chosen, about whether time could erase everything someone once was. Before the story continues, take a moment and reflect. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of compassion, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Her name was Margaret, and she lived in the apartment next to mine in a quiet town in Ohio, the kind of place where autumn leaves piled up along sidewalks and people nodded politely without truly knowing each other. I was Thomas, a middle-aged man who had learned to keep life simple after my own share of disappointments. Margaret had moved in 2 years earlier with her husband Richard, a man who always seemed impatient, always checking his phone, always one step away from somewhere else. Over time, I noticed small things. Margaret stopped wearing the bright dresses she once loved. Her laughter grew softer, then rarer. When Richard finally left, it was sudden but not surprising. One day his car was there, the next day it was gone, and so was the version of Margaret who used to greet the mornings with cautious hope. In the weeks that followed, Margaret moved through life like a ghost. She still went to work at the local library, still watered the plants outside her door, but her eyes no longer met anyone else's. Loneliness settled into her apartment like dust, coating every surface. I could feel it even from my side of the wall. Some nights I heard her pacing, other nights I heard nothing at all, which felt worse. The town had its opinions, of course. People always do. Whispers about age, about being replaced, about how men leave when women grow older. Those whispers can sink into the bones if you let them. Margaret struggled most with the mirror. It became an enemy that reminded her of years she could not get back. She saw every line as a failure, every gray hair as proof that she was no longer enough. The younger woman Richard chose lived only in her imagination, flawless and glowing, a comparison Margaret never stood a chance against. The pain was not just that he left, but that he made her feel invisible. She questioned every memory, every moment of love, wondering if it had all been a lie. Change began slowly, almost imperceptibly. One afternoon, during a heavy rainstorm, the power went out in our building. The hallway was dark, and people stepped out of their apartments, unsure of what to do. Margaret stood there, clutching a small flashlight, looking lost. I offered her a cup of coffee made on a gas stove, and she hesitated before accepting. We sat at opposite ends of my kitchen table, the rain drumming against the windows like a heartbeat. No advice was given, no solutions offered, just quiet presence. Sometimes that is enough to remind someone they still exist. Over the next few months, small routines formed. We walked in the evenings when the air smelled of wet pavement and fallen leaves. Margaret began talking again, not about Richard at first, but about books she loved, about her childhood in a small church community in Pennsylvania, about how she once dreamed of writing. Her faith, though shaken, still lived somewhere. Inside her, bruised but breathing, I watched her shoulders slowly straighten, her steps become more certain. Healing did not arrive like a miracle. It crept in like dawn, light by light. The real test came when Margaret received the divorce papers. The envelope sat unopened on her kitchen counter for hours. When she finally signed her name, her hands trembled, but there was a strange calm in her eyes. It was the look of someone who had reached the end of one story and survived it. She cried that night, deeply and freely, not out of despair, but release. Grief has many faces, and this one looked like surrender. As winter turned into spring, Margaret did something unexpected. She joined a community choir at a nearby church led by a kind man named Samuel, whose patience and warmth seemed endless. Music filled a space in her that words could not. Her voice, once hesitant, grew stronger. Standing among others, she remembered what it felt like to belong without conditions. The choir became a lifeline, a reminder that beauty is not erased by time, but transformed by it. There was a moment, one quiet afternoon, when Margaret stood outside in the sunlight, eyes closed, face tilted upward. The lines on her face were still there. The years were still written on her skin. But something had shifted. She was no longer asking if she was pretty. She was discovering that she was whole, worthy, enough. The past did not vanish, but it loosened its grip. Richard never came back. He never apologized. And strangely, that stopped mattering. Margaret learned that closure does not always come from others. Sometimes it comes from choosing yourself, again and again, even when it feels impossible. She began wearing color again, not to impress anyone, but because it made her smile. She started writing in the mornings, her words spilling onto the page like prayers. Just before the ending of this story, I want to ask you something important. Please take a moment to comment below and share your thoughts, or tell us if you or someone you know has ever felt invisible or replaced. Your words might help someone else feel less alone. The last time Margaret and I talked about that painful question she once asked, she laughed softly, not bitterly but gently. Life had not turned out the way she planned, but it had given her something unexpected. Strength, perspective, a deeper understanding of love that begins within. She had learned that being left behind does not mean being left worthless. If this story touched your heart, if it stirred something deep inside you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive and reaching those who are quietly hurting. Margaret's journey did not end with a new romance or a dramatic reunion. It ended with her standing firmly in her own life, no longer measuring herself by someone else's choice. In a small town in the United States, behind ordinary doors and quiet streets, a woman rediscovered her light. And sometimes, that is the most powerful ending of all.